Good evening. Welcome to the CityLit Mental Wealth Festival and to our main event this evening, which is a webinar on the topic of men's mental health and focusing a little bit on my pet topics of creativity, connection and community. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome everybody to what I hope and what I know will be a lively, interesting and hopefully useful discussion for everybody listening. And I'm just kind of so honored to have such incredible guests joining the discussion with me this evening. So to quickly introduce, and we'll go more into hearing the stories of our panelists this evening. I have with me this evening Tom Davies, who is the creator and presenter of Proper Mental Podcast. Should I say award-winning? Right, Proper Mental Podcast.
Multi-award-winning.
Multi. We have Stu Mills, who is the founder of The Noisy Brain, incredible app and community exploring mental health through lyrics, music, and collaboration between writers and artists. We have Jon Salmon, mental health campaigner and co-founder of Speakers Collective and What's Going On in Your Head.
Hello.
And finally, we have Luke Ambler. I'm looking at you. Dad, you like kind of coming with dad, right, Luke? Dad, former professional rugby player, storyteller, and founder of the incredible Andy's Man Club and hashtag It's Okay to Talk, I believe.
Good evening.
So awesome. So welcome, men, to the webinar. Yashoda Rodgers will also be joining us a little bit later from 64 Million Artists to talk about a collaboration between Noisy Brain and 64 Million Artists. And we'll explore that at the end of our panel this evening. So just to set the tone in a way, we're looking at men's mental health and looking at any sets of statistics. It's a recurring feature that men in general report lower levels of life satisfaction. They're less likely to access therapies. Only 36% of referrals in the NHS to therapy are for men. And biggest of all, I think, is men are three times more likely to die by suicide than women, particularly in the age group of 40 to 49. And sadly, suicide is the biggest cause of death in men under the age of 50 in the UK. So sort of within that space, we hope tonight's discussion might kind of speak into that space and explore what might be happening there, what men's challenges might be, but also looking at what kind of solutions might be, or solutions perhaps the wrong word. What can help men, or what are men able to access to support themselves and I think support others as well within this context. So I'd like to begin with the impossible task of inviting our panelists into the space, really, by telling a little bit about their story or their journey. Kind of, we're all kind of working, campaigning, active within the space of mental health. And I kind of think it's really interesting to kind of start with, I suppose, lived experience or personal experience and sort of what brings all of us here into this space, I suppose. So, Tom, maybe I'll begin with you, put you on the spot. Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, excuse me, as Ian mentioned before, I host a podcast called Proper Mental, and I get to speak to all sorts of different people about different aspects of mental health and mental illness and mental well-being. And I kind of started that almost 3 years ago. In 2016, I had a mental health breakdown, and for a lot of years, I wasn't very well at all. I had a lot of problems. And as I was kind of coming out of that towards the end, I made a conscious decision to start being more open and honest about my mental health and trying to talk about it and not hiding the fact that I'd been poorly. And I found that speaking to people and speaking openly led to incredible conversations that were really empowering and really healing and really helped me to get better and to understand my own experience. And I wanted to have those conversations. I wanted to have more of them and have them in a way that more people could hear them. Essentially, the version of me a few years ago who didn't know any of this stuff could hear them. And that's kind of where my podcast came from initially. And like I say, nearly 3 years and 150 episodes deep, and still going strong. But that's how I came to it anyway.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. I might come back to this later, but I'm really interested in the idea of whether it's specific to men or maybe it's kind of there generally within mental health. But that kind of theme of, helping others is also helping ourselves, or in that case of helping your former self. And sort of, this is what I would have found useful. This is what I would have liked to have heard. And there's something kind of quite powerful in that kind of giving to ourselves through giving to others as well, maybe.
Yeah, very much so. Very much
Yeah.
so.
Awesome. Stu, would you like to come into the space and let us know a little bit about your background?
Yeah, well, much like Tom's just explained, my relationship with my mental health led me to start the Noisy Brain. I've had various depressive darkness episodes, and I had a major sort of episode about 4 years ago where I stupidly didn't talk to the people. It gained momentum, and I started masking with alcohol, and which led me to like an incident that led me to sort of like spend a bit of time in prison. During that time, I started writing a lot, and I sort of just basically found that it was a really good outlet. And then somebody took some of my writings and made it into music and into a song. So from then, I just basically sort of decided to encourage other people to use writing as an outlet. I found it really good to sort of like get all my feelings out. And then, as I said, somebody was kind enough to turn it into a song, and that was basically the whole incident that basically changed my life and made it. I have got a more positive outlook on everything at the moment. It's a bit of a rush description of the Noisy Brain, but I know everybody else has got to have their bit as well. So yeah, I mean, it's still, to me, it's still early days. Like we've been doing it for almost 3 years. There's around about 25 songs completed, and there's around about another, say, 15, 20 supposedly being made all around the world. It's exciting, but it's the most exciting thing I've ever done. So I'm hoping that more people will join and share their experiences of mental health, and we can look at trying to turn some of those into songs.
Yeah. Cheers, Stu. And I love this sort of that sense of, from your very challenging experience, sort of something that touched you, something that was transformative to you, then becomes the heart of what you work on in the Noisy Brain, and sort of offering that transformation or the potential for it. Nothing is ever guaranteed, right? But the possibility of kind of working creatively to express and collaborate. It's all about the connection as well. I think.
The collaboration is very important, and the conversations, like Tom, the conversations are very inspiring that I have with a lot of contributing writers and even musicians. It's amazing that how many musicians pick up a writing that they've had that experience, and that's why they've sort of adopted that particular writing and turned it into song.
Yeah, thank you. Luke, would you like to come in now and give us a little bit of your background?
Yeah, so possibly slightly different angle to the both, the other two amazing chaps. Obviously, I had my own struggles. My mum suffers with a mental illness, has done since I was about 8 years old when she had a car crash and ended up with some brain damage. She has a rare condition called NEAD, non-epileptic attack disorder, which basically means she drops and falls. She ended up developing anxiety that bad that she didn't leave her house for 4 years. So I learned about anxiety, depression, mental ill health 25 years ago when there was some real stigmas. There weren't amazing conversation like this happening. And then I had a bit of an identity wobble when I got let go from the Leeds Rhinos, who were world champions at the time, and my dreams were crushed. It hit my own bit of a dark patch, which we haven't got time to go into today. But my real, I guess, avenue into mental health was when I was in a really good space myself, bulletproof, I'd say. I don't even call them coping strategies, thriving strategies. I was just flying, back with rugby, back with mindset. No matter what faced me, I had this theory like, what's next? No matter what hits me right now, what can I do about it? And I genuinely believed in it. And then 3rd of April came 2016, and you know, my brother-in-law were on at my house having a good laugh and joke like he usually would with me and my missus. Well, you know, we're talking about all sorts of stuff, and then, you know, tragically 3 days later, I get a phone call that he took his life. And 23-year-old, I'll be honest with you, I was extremely pissed off at first. As a professional rugby player, we got all sorts of checks. We got told how to check his knackers. We got told how to, we got heart screenings. We got all sorts of presentations, but no one ever told me that the biggest threat to my life was me, or Andy's life were him. And I had this little bit of an annoyance inside that people really needed to know this, and not just know about it. I think a lot of the time we keep talking about awareness and all this stuff. Awareness is a small fraction of it. You know, actually telling people to talk, teaching them how is another, but then giving them a platform to do so, you know, is the biggest of all. So I just came up with a very simple idea. Approached my mother-in-law, Andy's mum, and said, I want to start something called Andy Roberts Coffee Club. And obviously none of you have heard of that, because we went away from that. We said, we want it to be more than just about Andy Roberts. We want it to be about every man. And we just created this little safe space where men could come, have a chat, have a giggle. I think we don't talk about that enough. You know, in suicide prevention, it's always about trying to stop the person take their life. And I've put a spin on that, and it's actually not really about that. Suicide prevention really is about life appreciation, isn't it? And hope, and showing people positive. So if a guy can leave a group laughing when he walked in at the depths of despair, that's way more powerful than trying to convince him to stay and tell him how, you know, just talk about how you feel. Talking about how you feel helps get rid of some of the shit. But what you put back in is just as important, and what you surround yourself with. So created this safe space. Didn't think anyone would come. Me and my mother-in-law sat there. 9 blokes walked through the door, all different shapes, sizes, races, religions, different economic backgrounds. They all opened up. One of the most powerful nights of my life. Week after, 15 men turned up, and then just had a simple idea, right? 15 men have turned up in 2 weeks. How many can turn up in however many weeks? So I did a little selfie campaign called It's Okay to Talk. That blew up, and now we sat 7 years on with about 150 of these groups, 155 to be precise. And it's really honoured. I'm really honoured to be at City today and say we had his record numbers last night of over 3,500 men attended our groups up and down country. And it's a free service, no referral. No, you've got to be a 1 out of 10 to be able to use our service. If you get to one of our groups and it only fits 30 in and 60 turn up, we just make it work. We don't have to be a certain level of illness, a certain level of poor health. In fact, you can turn up just because you feel a little bit lonely, because, you know, it's prevention rather than cure. So that's my sort of route in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. And I think it's just incredible. I've attended Andy's Man Club. Unfortunately, I have things on Mondays now, and I can't go anymore, so I'm sort of missing that from my life. But there's something really powerful about, like you explained, from my experience, is like that movement from kind of talking about really serious, kind of difficult stuff, and just shifting into a space of humor and making a joke. And there's something kind of really powerful about being able to do that and share that space, where people are being open, but like you say, the importance of having a laugh and kind of, also kind of bringing a bit of lightness into that darkness, in a sense. I think so.
In or out of an Andy's Man Club, even if it's in pub, if it's at work, if it's just out for a walk with your mate, if you can get rid of some of that, whatever you want to call it, that crap, that trauma, that issue, just get rid of it. It don't mean you've got to linger on it and keep talking about it with your friend, or your friend's got a question on it. Sometimes it's just like, no, actually, that's enough. Bang. Now, I'll give me some banter or talk some shit. Let's have some fun now, and that's how I think Andy's Man Club sort of built on. I guess from being a rugby player, it was sort of rugby room mentality. You were really tight together. You're going to war together, but then you'd also call people out and you'd also make people laugh. And ultimately, that's all we all want to do, right? We all want to be happy. So if you've got space, and I'm reiterating this because the idea of Andy's Man Club is that there's never meant to be an Andy's Man Club. So if we can get to a point where people have these conversations without needing to go sit in a man's circle, even better.
Yeah. I was thinking, there's something in there for me about, as you were saying, of sort of, the limit of talking and kind of knowing when I've said enough or feel I've shared enough. And it's, I wonder about that statistic about men perhaps not accessing therapy, where in a way you're in a room for 50 minutes, an hour, and it can be quite intense and can be quite serious. my own experience of therapy. So there's something, having that different arena where there is movement and there's other ways to move. I'm not saying all therapists are deadly serious. You can have fun in therapy, but there is that sense of the pressure that's put on it that almost kind of can exacerbate, in a way, I think, for some of us, the pressure on our mental health.
Ultimately, being able to look at a guy across the room who is facilitating that group, who's just come through that door like you, been probably through exactly what you've been through or something very near, and you're looking at him thinking, you look like you've got your shit together. And how can you look like you've got your shit together when you're meant to be, I'm in a mess. Wait a minute, but you've been through what I've been through and you look all right. Maybe I can be that. And it just gives people hope, doesn't it? Actually, I might be sat in that chair one day with a ball in my hand introducing rules of this group. And that is just a little carrot and a stick in it, or it's a little bit of light in the tunnel for a guy who comes in depths of despair. Nothing wrong with therapy. I think everyone needs to find their thing. Often I think where the detriment comes in therapies is that most people aren't aware enough that no one gets into therapy as a therapist just because they like the idea of it. The majority of the time, if you speak to therapists on a deeper level, they've all had their own traumas and setbacks or issues. They're just not allowed professionally to be able to share that with you. But when you can understand that everyone's dealing with shit on a day-to-day basis, aren't they? They're all fighting their own way through it. I think it just makes you have that little bit more of a deeper connection with people.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm a trainee psychotherapist, so I know that myself. I don't come pure. I have I have my own shit in my background. Still have struggles.
And that is pure.
And that doesn't. Yeah. So thanks for saying that. It's good. I'm just to bring in Jon to the conversation. Jon, would you like to introduce yourself, and we'll come back to some of these ideas because there's some really interesting stuff emerging.
Yeah, just really proud to be here and listening to Stu, Tom, and Luke. I think lots of nodding. I think kind of with Andy's Man Club is definitely like the gold standard of support that's out there. And I think you kind of mentioned around 36% of NHS referrals only being men, and also something that's quite evident at the moment is those minority communities that are more higher rates of suicide within those kind of groups, and cost, and and being able to either waiting list or to access support services. There's the stigma of getting access to them, but also the cost. So a lot to talk about. But from my side, I've been talking and doing things around mental health for the last 6 years. It was never my intention, probably like most of us on this call, sadly in 2016, a friend of mine, she took her own life. She was struggling, unbeknown to me, with postnatal depression, and that really was, mentally, I was in quite a strong place then, before hearing that news. But that made me really angry. That how come in 2016, why wasn't she able to get the help that she needed? And that sent me on the road to starting to talk about my own mental illness. In my first job in my early 20s, I ended up having kind of a breakdown. I was sectioned and I was in hospital. I was off work for the best part of a year. And a couple of things, probably the reason for that kind of breakdown was the environment which I was working in was quite high paced. I wasn't asking for help. But also a few years before that, very sadly, my dad had depression and took his life, and we got absolutely zero therapy, talking. We just literally buried that grief deep down, and that obviously came to kind of bite its head very quickly. Well, not very quickly, actually. It took a few years, but it did come back up, and that ended up in me having severe mental illness, and section in the hospital. And I guess over the last kind of 5 or 6 years, I think, doing different things around mental health with my company, Byte Entertainment, whether that's producing music videos that challenge stigma around mental illness, or doing websites. I think it's kind of, and again, with what we're talking about today, is how do we reach men and just in general, just different people to engage with mental health. Talking works for some, but but it's, you know, I think that's part of my brain. The bit that I like is listening to what Stu has to say with creating an app that's something creative around mental health, or Tom, what you're doing with your amazing podcast. I think that's, you know, talking's really good. We need the safe spaces like Andy's Man Club for men to come together, but also there's so many events, like even that I've done in the last week. It's still predominantly women in the audience. It's still within the whole world of mental health. It's still a very female space to be in. There needs to be more men, either behind the scenes doing things, or being more vocal to encourage other men to get help, because as we've been saying, the statistics are too tragic, really. That men aren't getting them, asking for help, or waiting too late to ask for help.
Yeah. Thank you, Jon. I suppose, you know, one, just kind of picking up on what various kind of members of the panels have said, you know, about, you know, how things have changed, you know, within your own stories, you know, a sense of, you know, when some of us might have been struggling, there didn't seem to be much there. So there's something, you know, I think kind of really good that there is so much more available now. But yet also within this, there are those questions or challenges about access, whether that's, you know, from an economic perspective, and there's perhaps a class question here as well. It's there in the statistics about kind of working class or kind of, you know, economically poor kind of members of society. And also, so, you know, there's that access, but also kind of, I don't know, I'm curious about, you know, and not to generalize men, again, that's something I should have said at the beginning, but, you know, thinking into that space of kind of, you know, those internal barriers. And I sort of, I don't know, picking up on a sense that, you know, only sort of getting help when we're at crisis, or when it kind of gets to an extreme, and kind of picking up on some of the words used, like masking, you know, bulletproofing, these sorts of ways of keeping it in, I suppose. So I just want to sort of put that question out there, I guess, about, you know, what is it that is difficult for men, whether from our own experience or from, you know, the conversations that you've had, or kind of from Andy's Man Club, you know, any sense of like what are the challenges, what are the barriers for men, I suppose?
Do you know, just before we answer that, because I think they've all got barriers, but I just think there's a lot of talk that men don't talk. There's a lot of talk that men don't. They do. We do, because we're all in here now. We've all created our own things. We clearly at some point found the help. But do you think that maybe, if we're going to generalize it as men and women, do you think maybe women are better at looking into things than we are? Because I think we're in an unbelievably digital age where there's more resources accessible to us than ever before. I think sometimes we just want a tea put in front of us, don't we, before we're going to go and cook it. You know, and I think going out and hunting like we used to as men and finding these things, usually we're trying to find solutions. I think we maybe struggle with when we've got a problem, and as men, we categorically used to be fixers. We want to fix things. We're probably quite good at fixing things for other people. If the solution's not put in front of us for this problem we've got, because maybe we don't know there's a problem. Maybe we think there's something not right, but we don't want to accept it. So, you know, whether it's bereavement or whether it's, you know, anxiety, trauma, a lot of us push it so far away from us until it gets to breaking point a lot of the time. If you listen just to what most people said on here, it got to breaking point. You know, we masked it with drugs or alcohol, or just put his mask on and then I had a breakdown, or it just got too much. So is it the fact that men are asking, or is it just that we don't want to accept we've got a problem through just pure shame or ego, bravado? Because we're designed to provide and protect, aren't we? That's what we're designed to do. You know, we live in a different age now, but if you actually get back to who we are and what we are as human specimens, men was designed to provide and protect. The minute you feel that there is a sense of weakness in your armor, and I'm not saying it is weakness to have a problem, what I'm saying is if you feel there's a weakness, you might then feel that you can't protect your tribe. And then that adds to that issue of trying to push it away so you can still be that big, strong man. And then you add to that the actual answers to the question. You know, burden's a big one. A lot of time we're going for it. We don't want to put it onto people who are nearest and dearest to us, because, you know, we believe that, one, they've got their own stuff to deal with. They don't need ours. And why do they need ours on top anyway? And we should be able to fix it. The other one is weakness. We often think it's weak to admit we've got a problem, where none of us ever been through alt now will know that it actually took an amazing amount of strength and courage and bravery to be able to admit you had a problem and then go and deal with it. And the last one, a lot of time, is embarrassment, isn't it? You know, we live in a perfectionist society where, you know, we want everything to seem perfect. We do, don't we? You know, with the increase of social media, we marketing, we've got very clear cut images. Last thing we want is anyone to have a bit of a dint on his egos, that maybe their relationship ain't quite right, maybe they're not quite 100%. You know, is it gonna stop me growing my business, or is it gonna stop me getting a promotion? Are my kids gonna look at me differently if they know I've got a problem? You know, there's that embarrassment, that ego. And I think once we can start to drop the ego, which most people on here will have done, and they've found different avenues to be able to do that, the pressure comes off. And I think when the pressure's off and that backpack is off, it's a little bit easier to find the solutions. And then when someone does say, when your wife does put a leaflet on fridge, or one of your mates does say, you know, have you ever listened to this podcast, or have you ever gone, listen to this song? It's a little bit easier to accept it then. But you've got to get rid of that ego and that bravado first, and that ain't always easy.
Yeah. Some really good points there, I think. You know, just picking up, and I know you've talked about this before, Luke, about kind of, you know, flipping, you know, that idea of being vulnerable. You know, it takes that bravery, and it's just sort of shifting our perceptions of those sort of, you know, vulnerability as weakness and vulnerability as strength. And I think, you know, I was sort of the opening up of this, and I'd see moments of it sort of in my life. I was in the gym the other day and just sort of happened to notice these two lads come in, and one of them sort of opened his bag and he had this sort of self-help mental health book at the top of his bag. Go, oh, I've got this in my bag, as if he hadn't placed it there, right? And sort of gave it to his friend. It was just a really beautiful moment where it's like, oh, this, you know, it's just like normalizing that, helping each other, and kind of, you know, no ego there. It's just, you know, just this chance, and it was quite low key. I don't know, just kind of that, what you're saying a little bit kind of brought to mind that. I'm also thinking about, you know, you talked there about sort of, yeah, that feeling of being a burden and kind of, you know, having to maintain strength. I also wonder about the flip side of, you know, the way in which kind of men's mental health, or, you know, it doesn't have to be men in general, but kind of how mental health struggles and suffering manifests. And that idea of, you know, that sadness or suffering or pain can manifest in the form of anger, as almost like a mask for the sadness, or manifest as aggression and violence, or these sorts of things. There's almost sort of that, yeah, again, a way of pushing people away rather than kind of opening up space to talk. Anyway, just some thoughts. Stu, do you have any reflections or want to share anything on this?
I mean, going back to sort of what Luke said about us sort of always looking for the answer or anything, I think that's kind of the problem that I found myself in, was basically I just kept going forward. And now on reflection, like, and something that I try and encourage, well, as many people as possible, but people that approach me about my situation and what I went through, and I sort of like try and encourage people to sort of stop, and if they can, to sort of pause, reset, you know, change their routine, and you know, that routine change can be as simple as, you know, taking up a different hobby, you know, but always not going through that same routine. And like it becomes self-fulfilling, doesn't it? Like if you don't sort of step away from, you know, like for myself, and I don't know why I wasn't able to talk to anybody. It wasn't a case of like, you know, I was alone. I just didn't have the guts to talk to somebody. But now I realize that if I'd have just paused and stopped and changed my routine, and it's even now when people approach me, there's a thing that I've noticed. I mean, I know the Noisy Brains are all about encouraging people to write about their experiences, etc. But I've started actually doing walk and talks, because friends approach me and they say, Stu, like, you know, you've been through, we know what you've been through, and can I sort of like share some things? The first thing they always say is like, let's meet in the pub. And I'm like, nah, get your walking boots on or your trainers, and like we'll go for a walk in the, you know, I'm lucky enough to live near the rainforest. I thought would take people off into the rainforest, and it's like we just walk. There's a lot of silence in those walks, but the silence is people pausing and thinking about their situation. And I think it's something we as society are not trained to do. We just keep plowing forward and, just going, oh, well, it'll sort itself out. But it ultimately doesn't, and, when I had my situation, I was lucky enough to have my wife, around. I didn't talk to my wife before the incident happened. I didn't tell her there was a problem. And as soon as it did, like I was, friends, family, but there's a supportive bubble around you, which at the time, you just don't even think of it. It's there. You just think you've got to do all these things on your own. But she actually basically said to me, like, I've just bought you some pottery lessons. And I was like, pottery? I used to do that at, school or, college or whatever. And I just loved it. It was just a case of just like being able to just concentrate literally with the actual task in hand. And your mind was just like free. And I found that such a beautiful thing. I should go back to doing that actually. But, just sort of taking up a new hobby and something that sort of like, I found that art, I used to do art and I used to sort of work in an art sort of kind of advertising industry. But I've kind of, when I was working on these things, in the industry I was working on, I'd forgotten all my hobbies. I'd forgotten all my loves and my passions. I was just work, work, work. And I think that's a problem. A big problem with everybody in society now is they just keep moving forward. And if we can sort of like take some time out, even just gardening. I love gardening now, and it's kind of weird. So it's like,
I think there's that thing there about, like you say, there's this, even picking up what Luke was saying, that sense of doing and being active. And so, one of those ways almost to kind of avoid difficulty, is to bury oneself in work or bury oneself in a particular activity. And so, I think that's useful advice, sort of, just as we said, sort of having a raft of things there, possibilities, a hobby, different activities, and bringing in change, can be beneficial. But, if people are struggling, it can be hard to even kind of push into those spaces at the same time. So, just acknowledging that as well. And and there's, walk and talks. I wonder if there's something there about silence and, being sitting with silence. Whereas if you're doing something, if you're walking, that you don't get uncomfortable in that silence. It's sort of, there's something else to look at or do and to be together. Yeah. Thank you. Tom, is there anything sort of you wanted to pick up on from the discussion or kind of offer any reflections?
Yeah, I suppose, excuse me, in my own experience, one of the biggest factors why I didn't speak to anyone, I didn't ask for help, I didn't mention anything for a long time, was because I purely didn't have the words. I didn't know what was happening to me. And you only know what you know, right? And at that time, I didn't follow any mental health accounts on social media. I didn't read any books. I'd not heard of anyone who works in that space. It just, I can't tell you how off my radar it was. It never occurred to me I could ring a doctor for something that wasn't like a physical ailment. That never went through my mind. It was about 2 years before that even got brought up. And I did not know the words for what was happening. And I just thought I was going mad, like someone off the telly. And my only frame of reference for that was like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and all these that was is it a film from like the 70s? That was my only frame of reference for it. And yeah, if you don't have the words, then you can't ask for help. If you don't know what's happening, like you don't know who to ask. Who do you talk to? How do you talk to anyone if you don't even have the words to describe your experience? And I think that's really, particularly as we record this and it's like Mental Health Awareness Day, it's like, I think sometimes that's something that we need to remember is like how to reach these people who don't know this stuff exists, because it's really, really easy when you know it. I can refer to people, I can signpost people, I can spread the word, and I love to do it. But me then, I'd no one I could ask. Not a single person mentioned anything. And yeah, and I'd no idea what was happening to me, and I think that's really, really common. I think that's something that stops people. It's like, well, how do you talk about something if you don't know what it is, you know? And yeah, language.
So even the language, the language becomes a barrier, I think. And I imagine, I'm seeing lots of nods here. I think that's quite important. I know from my experience, I've been engaged in, I've been on, one thing that helped me was going on a men's retreat with men without masks, and sort of, the activity along with the reflective time, helped to kind of give me more language around it. But even when I started therapy as part of my training, it was sort of a big surprise to me that I used to describe myself as having anxiety, and I actually realized that I didn't have anxiety, but I had sadness and anger and all these other feelings that it's not that I didn't have the language for them. I couldn't connect it to what I was feeling. So I think there's and just sort of adding something into that space, there's a language for it. And then sort of, connecting words to what's going on in the body and what's being experienced. And there's kind of how do we push over those sort of barriers or limits?
That's it. You have to learn it, right? You have to learn it. It's like French. You want to learn a language, then you got to practice, and you got to start with 1 or 2 words and find a way to pick them up and practice and keep practicing. And, eventually you find more words and find a way to be able to talk about your experience. When I first started in advocacy, the story I told then was very different to the story now. The same stuff happened, but how I describe it and my knowledge over it. The reason my show is called Proper Mental, because I thought I was going proper mental. That's the only words I had for my experience. I knew nothing about, I didn't know what depression was. I didn't know what anxiety was, nothing at all, So yeah, you have to kind of, I think there's a real difficulty in getting started with that.
Yeah. And I really think, these campaigns and the work that's been done over the years, it's okay to talk, and kind of, is also a literacy building and kind of getting used to talking. And then through listening, I think that kind of adding it's good to listen as well. And it's safe to listen to people talk about their feelings, and that it's in that connection, in that exchange, that we kind of learn about ourselves and learn about feelings and kind of get more comfortable with talking, right?
Definitely. If you hear someone else's story, you can borrow the words. If there's a little bit of you in there somewhere, it doesn't have to be your story exactly. It doesn't even have to be the same diagnosis or the same situation or the same background. But if you can recognize some of yourself in it, you can borrow those words, and you can then use them to talk to someone, or to ask for help, or to explain what's going on, or just to kind of get some understanding of it yourself. And then that gets the ball rolling. And, that's the hardest bit, right? I mean, that's just basic laws of physics, right? And an object that's not moving will continue not to move until something changes that, right? So it's like, if we can get that ball rolling, then that's it. Then you're off to the races then, and much better things can start to happen, I think.
Yeah.
And with that, I mean, getting the vocabulary right and the wording, etc. Once you actually do open up and you talk to, whether it's a friend or whether it's a group, or go to it like Andy's Man Club, the weight that is lifted from your shoulders is just amazing. I mean, I couldn't believe it once I actually opened up how much better I felt. Obviously going and doing it more regularly is a major help. I mean, I'm always sort of like, using Andy's Man Club. It's okay to talk to everybody. Like, I'm a big fan of Andy's Man Club, and that the way that is approaching the problem, getting people out and talking is great. And I like you say, just the more you talk, the more everybody's going to be feeling a lot more able to open up. Openness and honesty is key.
Yeah.
And if I could just come back into the, some real positive progress that's happening is when we're looking at language and what for young people. So my kids' primary school, they've got Place to Be, and that is a space where I said to my daughter, what's Place to Be all about? And it's like, oh, it's a room I can go and talk about my feelings. And and my son, who's he's only 8, but they already have that built. They're very lucky that they've got that built into their school. And talking about they're so far ahead of that 10-year-old daughter of mine is light years ahead already, and my son, with at least having some of that language to be able to talk about it. And that is the hope that we've got to start really early
That's fantastic.
with mental health awareness and support in schools, but also that literacy, that ways to be able to describe it. Because when I had my mental health problem, to me, it came as a massive surprise. It was like one day I was working, the next day I was in hospital. I didn't see it coming at all. Now, when I look back at it, all the signs were there, But again, what Tom was saying, what we've all been saying, is we just, we didn't see the signs sometimes, or maybe we did, but we just didn't feel we could actually ask for help. And so I think it is so important that we get that support or into schools and young people.
Yeah. And I think sort of from the other direction about sort of, asking for support, but also checking in with each other as well. I just wanted to sort of move, using that to move into kind of thinking about community. We've got a question in the chat around sort of young men and joining gangs. And I'm just sort of picking up on what some of the things you were saying, Luke, about kind of the tribe and the community, there's a community thing there. And, we've got the great example of Andy's Man Club, which is in a sense a community, a tribe, in a way of belonging there. And you've got this kind of, in that desperation to belong or to have contact with other people and be part of something, that can move in that negative direction, I think. And it's having these things to belong to, to work within that perhaps we've lost, as we perhaps know, over the past 10 or so years, losing youth clubs, using kind of these other kind of options or kind of ways for people to be together in a positive way, I think. Yep. Sorry, Luke, I think you were going to come in with something.
Just what John said about language. I think we all harper on about physical and mental health being put on par, right? But one thing that bugs me with mental health, and I'm sort of like I like to sort of debunk some common things that get put out, like checking with a mate. It's completely bullshit, isn't it? Because I've got 20 mates. How can I know which one's struggling at exact time when we're all so good at wearing masks, right? What it is it's about breaking stigmas that they feel comfortable enough to reach out to me. And all the aim, and I'll tell you what I mean about that. We asked Andy, not he was suicidal, like how's things going and that, and he told us everything they were going through that weekend. Never said he was struggling with it. Just sort of made a joke about the fact that he was struggling about maybe not seeing his ex for a while. But let me explain what I mean about language, because it was just something that John said there, and I started really thinking about it, right? And I was just thinking, with mental health, it's either you've got poor mental health or you aren't. So you're either anxious, or the hope that we sort of sell to people is that don't talk about it and then you won't be anxious. Talk about it and you might be able to just cope with depression. And I don't think that's enough, because if you're overweight, you don't aim just to not be overweight. You usually aim to get fitter, healthier, stronger, more flexible, be able to throw your grandkids in here or your kids in here. Like, you always want to be healthier, right? That's the idea. You eat better so you become healthier. I just think that, we talk about anxiety, depression. Surely we've also got to start promoting joy, calm, patience, happiness, excitement, things to look forward to, and I just think that, thriving rather than just, I always think you're either surviving or coping. That's all the mental health space sort of promotes. You surviving or do some coping strategies and cope. Just get by, life, that's what it's about. It's either get away from struggle or get by. And I'm really big on this other area now, thriving. Like, there's got to be another area. Like, there's just got to be something more that, whether it is through, having amazing conversations on podcasts, whether it is, and John, I know you've done loads of running events and all sorts, haven't you? Like, and inspired people through that, or through writing lyrics. Like, there's just got to be something that gives you something worth living for. Like, and it was something that Stu said as well. Like, we all get boring when we get to a certain age. That's what really happens. We get stuck in those mundane lives where we, if you think about it, you only got a job at one point, unless you had to, because you wanted a little bit of freedom away from mum and dad. You would stop living in mum and dad's pocket, or, whatever your situation is. You maybe want to get your own place, and then you realise that there's no freedom at all in that. And suddenly you get stuck working your job, and then you stop doing even the free shit that you care about, like going out for a walk with your mates, going and throwing a football, kicking a football about, or passing a rugby ball about, all that free, getting up a mountain. None of it costs out, but we used to just do stuff that we used to enjoy. go jump into water or go have some fun. Like, do some crazy shit that, it doesn't have to be all illegal, but, go paintballing with your mates or Nerf gunning or whatever. Just stuff that makes, I even see everyone laughing now. And I do it all the time. I just do funny shit that makes me laugh because within next 100 years, I'm going to be dead. And it's that simple, isn't it? And I think we've got to give ourselves something in the morning that we'll wake up and go, got that next week, got that next month, I've got that next year to look forward to. Because it can't just be, I'm surviving, or I'm coping. It's got to be something more. It's got to be developing other emotionally intelligent words like patience, calm, fulfillment, joy.
I hear you.
If you want something funny, follow Luke's Instagram. That will definitely you made me laugh, Luke. Recently with your kids' holiday and losing your canoe, was it? So yeah.
There's always some carnage going on.
Yeah, but I love that. I love that sort of connect. I think it's a really good point. I think there is that sense, and maybe it's somewhere there in the statistics around kind of 40 to 50. That sense of stagnation, maybe, and and just go into survival mode, and really, ways. And I love this idea of thriving, and kind of, it's almost kind of trying to enhance that kind of generativity and sort of moving into creativity now, but kind of that generative energy. And as you were describing it, Luke, just that sense of, tapping into that inner playfulness and, having fun and kind of life being more than just surviving into thriving, and kind of, how we can support ourselves and each other. Yeah. Through that.
If you think what that's going to do, it's going to give you more memories, which is going to make you think when life does get shit again, you do a brew. Oh, remember when I had that bad patch? And I managed to still go out not long after and go and have loads of fun. And actually, this what I'm going through right now, that's the past is the hope now. It's always been shit. Everything I've always had, my story has always been, tragedy after tragedy. Actually, no, in between those two tragedies, you also had a load of fun. And you can also go have a load of fun again. And I think a lot of time we feel guilty when we are meant to be struggling or we are struggling that we shouldn't be having fun as well. And if you're struggling with something, it's not wrong way you still can't go out and distract yourself, escape from it, and go and have some fun still, is there?
Yeah, that's great. So I wanted to sort of, finish off kind of our talk this evening just with a little kind of exploration of creativity. Stu, you've talked about the work of Noisy Brain, and how writing, and this can be in a kind of very light way. There's no expectation around it. There's no pressure in a sense. It's just sort of writing down your thoughts and feelings and sharing. And then again, that generativity comes in, working with the app, working with kind of musicians, there's the possibility that these thoughts can become something. And there's something more happening there. I didn't know, Jon, whether you want to say anything about some of the work you do, because you work in creative fields and filmmaking and things, kind of the role of creativity within mental health for you.
Yeah, I think I've been very lucky, I guess. I don't see myself as creative, but I work with lots of creative people, I guess, over the years to make different films or different content. And so been very proud to be involved in some projects. And one of the things that I've been doing for a few years is called What's Going On in Your Head. And we will pick a particular subject and explore that through performance, through music, through poetry. They've been physical events that people have turned up to. They're not promoted as kind of mental health events. It's very much like a show that you come to watch. I think sometimes it's difficult to have some of these conversations, but when you can approach it in a creative way, it brings a different audience, and it also brings a kind of a better understanding and empathy for something, and for something that somebody's going through. So when we've done things on eating disorders or bipolar, or some of these borderline personality disorders, some of these different kind of labels that are out there, we can kind of demystify them via working with amazing individuals who you see beyond the diagnosis. You see their talent, their creativity, and again, what we've all been talking about is that breaks down that stigma. It's like, oh, okay. So I think that's what's really important, how the arts can be used to kind of get that level of understanding and empathy. And yeah, as Luke kind of says, entertainment, something that's going to make you laugh or, you know, kind of engage and remember.
Yeah, or move, or kind of, yeah, just tap into those emotions, I think. Yeah. I always think you know, all of my work is about, I teach about creativity. So I was just picking you up on, you know, I'm not very creative. And I'm like, you set up all these amazing organizations, things, you know. So I just sort of, you know, I just hold that space for kind of human creativity as this generative energy that we all have. We're born with it, right? And we, you know, there's something kind of, whether it's Stu's example of working with clay and kind of, you know, so it's got that sense of a mindfulness, you know, getting into body and using the hands is something that can be healing. But there's also something purposeful about setting up a business or setting up an organization and these sorts of things. And, you know, there's so many different ways to use kind of that creative generative energy, I think, that is directly connected to our sense of well-being and kind of our sense of purpose and our sense of thriving, to come back to what Luke was saying. So on the topic of creativity, I'd like to invite our final guest, Yashoda Rodgers from 64 Million Artists, and invite her just to talk with Stu about, well, do you want to tell us about your work, Yashoda, and what 64 Million Artists do and how we might get involved?
Yeah, of course. Firstly, I'd just like to echo Fran in the chat, who's just said, thank you for sharing your stories. And yeah, it's very powerful testimony of lived experience. So thank you. Yeah, so here at 64 Million Artists, we believe everyone is creative, and when we use that creativity, we can make positive change in our lives and the world around us. So exactly what you just touching on there, Ian, around, and Stu, and yeah, everyone around, you know, taking that time to pause and connect with hobbies and reflect. And yeah, so we're a community-led social enterprise, and we're really interested in the relationship between creativity and change. And again, to kind of echo things that have been said today around how it helps us understand our feelings, solve problems, manage stress, boost well-being. And yeah, we do that in a number of different ways, through co-creation and collaboration. And one of those is through our funded public program. So we provide free creative resources, workshops, events, and supportive networks for the people that work with people. So people who work in care homes, health services, communities, schools, workplaces. Yeah, so just to kind of speak to what was touched on earlier as well. So we kind of, yeah, we run these lots of creative programs that we offer for free in lots of community spaces. And we realize that, you know, good inclusion work means creating tailored resources and spaces, and men are underrepresented in our audiences. That we understand that, you know, from our research around and feedback around the kind of, yeah, the positive well-being, emotional regulation, a connection through creativity, you know, it's not a gender difference. So we're really trying to work in more ways to co-create programs that engage with men. And again, like I said, that kind of leads on to, you know, how we're working with Stu. You know, we co-create our programs, so we're really excited to have a creative prompt from Stu this week. And yeah, just to really quickly touch on a free resource that, yeah, I would like to share is we have a big annual campaign called the January Challenge, which, you know, January is a tough month for a lot of us. And we have 31 days of free creative prompts that are co-created from communities all around the UK, and lots of fun events and things happening throughout that month. But yeah, to go back to so alongside our January challenge, we run weekly creative prompts that are also free. So yeah, again, that leads me back to Stu getting involved and sharing his creative prompt this week. I don't know if you want to talk a bit about that, Stu, and why. Yeah.
Thanks, Yashoda. Thank you. Yeah, I just sort of, when the guys from 64 Million Artists approached me, I just wanted to keep it sort of a reasonable, simple brief. So it was really, I mean, the brief is, if you were to meet your younger self, what mental or emotional health related advice would you give? And what would you share with that younger self of yours? And I think that allows you to sort of, like, you know, really think a lot deeper about what you've been through, how far you've come, and, you know, how would you have potentially approached things differently? And I think it allows you to sort of like be a bit creative, but in a simple way. You don't have to be the most creative person in the world to sort of like actually start thinking about, you know, your life. You know, that to Luke's thing about, you know, that could be have more fun. It could be go out and have fun with your friends and you know, enjoy all those moments and memories. It could be as simple as that. And you know, there's a lot of studies to show sort of like the positive effects of writing on mental health. You know, it makes us all a lot more, I suppose, self-aware, which you know, can only be good. But yeah, I think it's a nice project to get involved with. So so I was getting distracted by messages coming up.
Sorry, that was me. That's me. Yeah, I've just dropped in the chat. If anybody listening is struggling, just some links to Samaritan's organisations that can help you, and do reach out if that does affect you. So sorry to distract you with that, Stu. You showed that, or Stu, no, you showed it how you know, how can people get involved? What can they do with the challenge?
So I can share something. So yeah, Stu's brilliant challenge. I've got I'm sharing it here now. It's an Instagram post. You don't need to be signed in, but just yeah. So get involved in that. And then also again, if anyone wants to like continue the conversation around creativity and getting involved, I'm going to share my email address and also the 64 Million Artists website. We have lots of free creative resources and lots of events coming up. So yeah, yeah, really, if anyone would like to get involved in those, I'm sharing those as well.
Super.
And if they could get shared for either 64 Million Artists or the Noisy Brain or both, you never know. Like those writings could potentially be adopted by musicians all around the world and potentially made into songs. Like, so there's another incentive.
Let's make some music. Yeah. Again, the Mental Wealth Festival this year, our chosen theme is connection, and this is kind of so important about kind of connecting, you know, all of us together, different organizations looking, you know, I love that word you showed of co-creation, you know, working with others. So please do get involved. Following the webinar, I'll be sending out links and information about all of our panelists and how you can get involved. If you're not already attending Andy's Man Club, every Monday night, 7 till 9. Is that right, Luke?
100%. Yeah, that's the one, except bank holidays.
Yeah. So, you know, check out the website, find your local local group. Tom Davies, where are you now? 160 podcast episodes?
150, yeah. 150. Yep, wherever you get your podcast.
Fantastic.
From. Awesome.
Fantastic.
So check out Proper Mental. And John, how can people get involved with what's going on in your head and your other work?
Yeah, it's what's going on your head.org. So have a follow of that. Yeah, and Jon Salmon on Twitter, or send me a message.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That I've got so many more questions that we haven't had time to ask. So, you know, hopefully we can kind of continue this conversation in other contexts and other areas and connect with more people, I think. So thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us this evening and for sharing your thoughts and experience. There's so much more there, and I'm really interested to hear more. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. And thank you to our audience. Mental Wealth Festival continues throughout this week. If you're in London, the majority of our events are in and around venues across London, primarily at CityLit, which is in Covent Garden. If you're in the area, do drop by. There are creative workshops, there's talks, there's exhibitions, there's so many activities. So, you know, do come in, say hello. I'll be there for the next 4 days. So come and say hello to me if you're around. And I'd love to connect and hear your story. And yeah, if you need any help or support, do reach out. We're there. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. And yeah, wishing you the best of health, everybody. Take care.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ian.
Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.